Hi there, everybody. I'm Fred Thomas, and you're watching All Things Bike. And today we are speaking with Monte Frank, Newtown, Connecticut resident and founder of Team 26 and the Sandy Hook Ride on Washington.
Hey, Fred.
Monte, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming out.
It's great to be here.
Oh, man. Tell us about your connection to cycling, Sandy Hook, and the inspiration for Team 26.
That's a lot. As you know, I mean, you and I have been banging heads against each other for a long period of time.
I know.
30 plus,
Good
40
times.
plus, 35 plus.
That's
We've had some good races, and I've certainly ridden your wheel to a couple podiums. I can never get by you at the end.
I know.
But
well, I'll never forget you giving me some space on Airport Road in the Tour of the Catskills, and there was a drop on my right, and you just moved over a little bit to the left, and I said, that was really, really thoughtful of Monte. But so that's the connection. We had a little digression there, but that's
yeah.
the
So I've been
connection.
racing bikes for a long time,
Yeah.
and I've lived in Newtown since 2003.
Mm-hmm.
My younger daughter went to the Sandy Hook Elementary School,
Mm-hmm.
and I represent the town as a lawyer. So, in the days following the shooting,
Mm-hmm.
many of us in town were just walking around in a fog. A buddy of mine joked, and it's not a great joke, but half the town, and if you went into the supermarket, were just kind of walking aimlessly with their shopping cart. The other ones were just banging into the walls.
Wow.
So, after a number of sleepless nights, I started doing some reading about the state of the gun laws in this country and how the NRA has kind of taken over the dialogue, and how easy it was to buy a firearm. And I certainly recognize the value of hunting and the gun culture, particularly after spending a lot of time in upstate New York, and I never wanted to disturb that.
Yeah.
But there's such a divide between where things ought to be to recognize people's rights to own a firearm under the Second Amendment, and where we are today, where access to firearms is so easy and our culture has gotten so violent.
Yeah.
So in the middle of the night, I decided to. Came to me that we could do this ride down to Washington to honor the memories of the 26-year-olds and the 6 teachers who were murdered in their classroom, and raise awareness about gun violence in a non-confrontational way.
But your message is sort of nuanced in a way. I mean, you use the term common sense. Elaborate on that.
Well, it's. There are common sense measures that will reduce gun violence without impacting people's Second Amendment rights. So, things like closing the loophole on background checks, so that anybody who wants to buy a firearm has to undergo a background check just to make sure that they are responsible and capable of owning a firearm.
Or legally too, right? I mean,
sure.
Yeah.
There's some other things, but at this point, it's really getting people into the discussion, just kind of drive that cultural shift that will make our society safer.
Right. I mean, do you find that in some way getting people on a bike, or getting them moving, or getting them out of the table where one side's on one side and the other side's on the other side, and do you find that sort of breaks down the barriers a little bit?
What I have found is, particularly on this issue and some of the others, is that the political rhetoric has gotten completely out of hand.
Right.
And people want to outscream each other. So what happens, right? It becomes a political wedge issue, and people go into their corners and they never talk. And what I found is, and I think why the bike is such a wonderful tool for this, is it brings people together to have that conversation around what will it take to make our kids safer. So you have the conversation. So to me, fighting gun violence is no different than fighting cancer.
Right.
It's killing an unacceptable number of Americans. And when you have the discussion around the issues, most people, not everyone, but most people can agree on a set of core issues that will reduce gun violence and make our kids safer.
Right. Well, tell us about the ride itself. So, I mean,
you were on the first ride.
I know.
So, we were honored to have you as our main representative.
I know. Well, I didn't realize that I was going to be part of something that has become what it is now.
And we didn't expect it to be. I mean, literally that first year, we didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And there were 26 riders, one rider for each person that was killed. And as we started rolling, we realized very quickly that not only was the media covering us, but I remember some of those first miles in Pennsylvania, right, where a pickup truck would roll alongside, roll down the windows, and a cyclist, you kind of shudder.
You're waiting for the you're tensing up.
And the guy said, "I saw you guys on TV this morning. Keep rolling." Or we'd go into a Wawa. And 16-year-old girls with cell phones would be recording us. So we knew that we had struck a chord, and what was so important to me was to do it in a way that is non-confrontational. So you can have a discussion around what can we do as Americans, all of us, to reduce the political rhetoric and come together on some common issues.
Have a conversation.
Have a conversation.
Well, riding your bike.
We've been doing that ever since.
Yeah, I know. So it's now in its 7th year?
We've done 7 rides.
7 rides. And so let's just talk briefly about the actual routes and what they're like, and so people get a sense of how long they are, and the points involved, the navigation, the support, and
so the first 6 years, with the exception of one, we went from Newtown down to Washington. 1 year we decided to turn our backs on Congress and ride from Washington back up to Newtown.
Oh, right.
But it's essentially the same ride. It's about 400 miles over 4 days. So for those of you who have done a century, we're doing a century every day, and some parts it's pretty fast, and some parts we're slowing down depending on where we need to be at a certain period of time. We have a number of events along the way.
That's right.
So, we look at it, it's kind of like a 400-mile rolling rally.
Right, right.
So when we stop in big cities, Philadelphia, we did a couple of years down in New York City, stopping in Harlem.
Right.
Morristown, New Jersey, we've been to all 7 years.
Right.
Baltimore, we've been to all 7 years.
Right.
We've added Trenton, University of Delaware, and then we show up at, on the steps of the Capitol.
Yep, right.
And we meet with a bunch of senators and
so
congressmen.
So you have it's a long ride essentially, and there. I mean, who's doing the navigation? Is it all now just in the GPS and it's
now it is, but we have a logistics team,
right? So you got,
and they spent 6 months designing the route and
so
organizing our rally, making sure that all our gear is getting from hotel to hotel.
The accommodations.
Accommodations, food. Yeah.
But then you have to be ready to make a statement, and we see this all over YouTube. Is the team rolls into Baltimore, and then there's the press is waiting, the mayor is there, and maybe local representatives, and then it's time for you to get up and say something. So do you have to prepare? Do you know what you
Yeah, I mean, I have talking points, and. Sure, I mean, you have to prepare, and like anything else, you prepare for a bike race. You prepare,
So,
if I'm going to court, I'm prepared. If I'm preparing to speak in public,
So,
I've got a sense of what I want to say.
Yeah.
It differs depending on where I am. The issues obviously in Baltimore are different than the issues in Morristown, New Jersey.
Right. So you can't just sort of read a script each time. Well, tell us about the other riders. Why are they riding? And the 26 riders on the ride. Why are they riding, and what is their background?
So one of the most heartfelt moments that I've experienced, not as a cyclist but as a person, human being, was our 5th year. We ended at the White House, and we were brought into the Roosevelt Room for a meeting with Valerie Jarrett, who was President Obama's person in charge of gun violence strategy.
Right.
And all the riders went around the room and said who they are and why they are doing the ride. And it was, each person had a different reason, but all connected to gun violence.
Wow.
So, our high school and college kids, they're concerned because of the proliferation of gun violence in school settings.
Right.
So, some of their experiences, they go into a classroom, they look to see where the exits are.
Yeah, geez.
We've got kids who are now growing up, not like we grew up, but they're growing up with lockdowns, looking for exits.
Right.
If they don't know somebody who's been shot, the 6 degrees of separation, it gets around. So that's one level. There are people who have experienced gun violence in their families. There are teachers who are worried about their own safety in their classrooms.
But are they from outside of Connecticut as well?
Well, you wrote from Maine.
Sure, of course.
We've had riders from Vermont, from Texas, from South Carolina.
Right. Okay.
We're going to branch out into California. So we try to make it representative of.
Yeah, it's no longer.
To us, it's not
New England, right?
Right. To us, it's not blue state versus red state.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
It's red, white, and blue. People from all walks of life and backgrounds.
No, that's great. Because originally it really was New England and Connecticut, and I remember there was one of the first responders who was on the ride. I think he was a police officer. He'd never been on a bike before.
Limited.
Limited.
I mean, good athlete, and he. Watching him, the determination, and that's true of a lot of our first responders, particularly those who are in the building on 1214.
Right.
To them, it's real. They wake up in the morning and go there to do their job. They never expect to walk into a school
I know.
and witness, 26
right.
6-year-olds blown apart by an AR-15.
Awful stuff. Well, let's move on to the atmosphere of the rallies and the what it feels like as a cyclist to ride into a city that's waiting for you to arrive.
Yeah. So we work on gun violence prevention 4 to 6 days a year. This year's ride was longer. It's a bunch of different emotions. I mean, it's exhilarating. To have come in and have a crowd. It's very emotional. You hear the stories of people who've been impacted by gun violence in their lives, and it's really it's tough. I've probably hugged more moms who have lost kids to gun violence than I ever thought I would, and each time you do it, it's palpable. I mean, you can. I mean, the pain is
very human, and it's.
And then you have a lot of mayors who every day are dealing with gun violence, and you can feel their frustration in wanting to reduce gun violence, but not being able to.
Yeah.
And then you have the state and federal politicians who finally have come to this issue as an issue. And my only concern is for some of them, it's become more of a wedge issue. For others, it's real genuine. So a guy like Mike Thompson, I just came back from California riding with him. He's chair of the Gun Violence Task Force in Congress. Veteran, gun owner, hunts regularly.
Wow.
Listening to him is, to me, it's just an honor to know him. Because this is something that's important to him. It's a legacy that he wants to leave. And it's genuine. It's for him. It's he's taking a courageous leadership role, and
you can have a conversation with him about it, and it's not a wedge issue for him at all.
It's actually, he's a pretty good cyclist. So I went out to California to do
Rock the Ride. Which, tell us about that.
So Congressman Thompson and the sheriff from Napa County and Rebecca Koch were on a ride together right after the shooting at the Veterans Facility in Yountville, California, which is in Mike's district. And they decided to do this event. It's now in the second year. They invited me out.
A similar kind of event.
Well, it's different, and it's something that I think, inspired by Mike, I think can grow to other parts of the country. It would be great to have one in Maine. So there are 350 or so cyclists. They added a walk this year. Another 350 people came. You come back, and I was one of the speakers. They called it Voices of Change. And it's talking about ways to energize people to reduce gun violence.
So it sounds like it was a charity ride or an event ride. I'm not sure what you call them, but it gets the people out to ride and address the issue.
And then 2 days later, Mike and Rebecca and I went for a 4.5 mile ride. Mike's a pretty good rider.
Oh yeah. That's great.
And I spent the time talking about what can we do to reduce gun violence. And one of the things that I've been preaching, and I'll get on my soapbox, is
right there.
If you look at other movements, right? whether it be to change the rights for the LGBTQ community or the civil rights movement in the 60s.
Right.
The culture changed. It was really a bottom up.
Right.
And the politicians followed.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when it changed,
that was it.
The rest of society
Everybody
was like,
got in
great,
line.
we're, you know, we've been there for a while now. It's
Yeah.
good that, you know, to me, the gun violence prevention movement is a little bit too top down, that there's so much pressure on the politicians, but not enough focus on driving the cultural change.
Right.
And I think where the NRA has done a very good job is framing the issue of gun rights as part of your bundle of rights as Americans, that, you know, owning a gun is like, you know, if you take that away, you're taking away my liberty as an American. And it's just not true.
Sure.
You know, you can have reasonable restrictions on gun rights and still respect the Second Amendment, just like you can have reasonable restrictions on free speech and respect the First Amendment.
Yeah.
The real struggle in it is to, you know, how do you change that dialogue? How do you drive the cultural change so that people recognize that you could have reasonable restrictions on your gun rights, but you can still own a firearm, you can still go hunting.
Right, right.
You can still have that culture that of gun ownership you already have, and you can reduce gun violence at the same time, so that you don't have to worry about your kids getting shot up in their classroom or a movie theater or what have you.
I mean, I mean, you're doing a great job of addressing it. I mean, I just imagine that it is such a big job, and it must be very hard every day to wake up and for you personally, and as you work on this, just to see you know, things move ahead and things don't happen.
But when I go out to California and I see Representative Thompson working on Rock the Ride and talking about bringing that to other parts of the country, you know, Susie Lee, who's the representative from Las Vegas, was at the ride. We talked for a while. She wants to do one there. We can do one in Pennsylvania. We can do one in Maine.
Sure, yeah. So you get inspired when you hear about that, right? I mean,
I get inspired, and then this year we rode to Pittsburgh. So we ended up at the Tree of Life Synagogue, which very powerful, very emotional. But you know, in between Baltimore and Pittsburgh, you know, that's the area of the country that, you know, we need to have conversations with people who live there and tell them, you know, this isn't, you know, a bunch of crazy Connecticut people, you know, preaching us as to how we handle our guns. This is a conversation about respect and how we can come together to reduce gun violence. And when you have those one-on-one conversations, whether it be at a country store, at the Wawa, or in Gettysburg, where we had a really good event.
Is the message getting through? I mean,
I think it really is. And you know, the polling data supports it. It's just a question of, you know, how can we really engage Americans in a way that is non-confrontational and is constructive.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, are there some ideas that you've got that might help, or strategies? I mean,
well, I think, you know, we're going to continue doing the Team 26 rides. So next year we're talking about two different scenarios. One would be going out to Chicago. The other one would be riding the California coast.
Right.
And then in 2021, you know, we may enter a team and race across America.
Oh, great.
And so, you know, we'll be going through
the whole
heartland, the whole country, with Team 26 plastered across our RV, and
that's
use it as an opportunity to spread the message of peace, hope, and love, and how do we make our society and our country safer.
No, that's great, Monte. I mean, did you ever expect it to get to this level?
No. Oh, no, you remember the first year. I mean, we just said, all right, let's go ride, and it grew, and then each year it got bigger and bigger.
But you had some sense of
I
what
saw
you
it the
wanted
first
to,
year. When I saw what happened the first year, you know, I realized that we were onto something that was bigger than ourselves.
Right.
And you know, look, I think when you can find that where you're not riding for yourself, you're not doing something just for yourself, but you're part of something bigger.
Yeah, absolutely.
It inspires you to do what's necessary.
Yeah. Well, there was a video, I think, of you having a conversation with Joe Biden, and we've seen Senator Richard Blumenthal a lot.
You know, Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut has been working on gun violence for a long time. You know, I think he gets it. You know, he gets a lot of pushback in the Senate, but I think one year he was at 4 of our events.
Wow, can you ride it? Would he be able to ride a leg?
I don't think so. Jim Himes, who's a representative from Lower Fairfield County, rode with us one year from
I think I remember that.
Newtown
Yeah.
to, I think we dropped him off just when we got to the New York line.
Right.
So he wrote part of it.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, if they can, if they were able to, had the time and the bike.
We had a great conversation with Joe Biden at the White House.
Yeah. What did he say?
So we, after we were in the West Wing, we came out. The Secret Service was kind of mulling around.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what was going on. And Joe Biden comes storming out of the Eisenhower building,
Right,
and it's
right.
like, "Hey guys, how's the ride? Where's Monty?"
Right.
It's
Right.
like-
Oh my goodness. And
and,
were you ready? Did you?
No, I had no idea he was coming.
Coming
So we
sweating,
had a very
right?
nice conversation. It was very. We talked a lot about Beau Biden and his son,
Oh,
who
yeah.
worked with some of the Sandy Hook families to when he was AG to pass some of the gun violence prevention laws in Delaware. And then he went. He spent about 15, 20 minutes with us. He went around to each of my riders and said, "I'm Joe. What's your name?
Wow.
Why are you riding?"
Good for him.
Do you remember Herb Jimenez?
I do.
So
Of
he
course.
walked up to Herb, and he said to Herb, "I'm Joe. What's your name?" He goes, "I'm Herb Jimenez from New Jersey. How can I help you, son?" And Herb said, "I'm really hungry. Can you get me a cheeseburger?"
Right
To the
on.
Vice President of the United States.
know, well, you
so
know,
that sent Joe Biden on a tizzy about
I bet, yeah.
the sub places. He wanted to pay for us, and
Oh my goodness. No, but you know, that was a human, natural, original, spontaneous moment, and
Yeah.
I'm sure Joe probably remembers it. And but you know, here's another question. You know, how would you bring the message and the organization to a state like Maine, or any state where there's a the culture of firearm ownership?
I would welcome the opportunity, and I think doing something like Rock the Ride and
Right.
around the Portland area.
Right. And so so your idea is a Rock the Ride where it's not necessarily Team 26 with the 26 riders. It's
No, we'd support
an
it.
event ride.
We'd be one of a number of groups. There are some very strong gun violence prevention advocates in Maine, Judy Richardson being one of them. So we'd work with some of the local groups. And it's a 25-mile bike ride that anyone can do. You try to set it up so it's flat. You do a 5-mile walk, and it's really trying to engage as many people
you're not
as you
making
can
it-
in a conversation. And from there, it's you spend the time here to talk to people.
Yeah.
And if you could convince 5 people that you're not trying to take all their guns away, and that it's all about making their kids or their grandkids safer. Who wouldn't
easier.
support
exactly.
that, right? And again, it's talking about gun violence prevention. You should, in my mind, it's a public health crisis,
Right.
And it ought to be treated that way. So
That's
it's
right.
no different than talking about reducing
Drunk driving or distracted driving
or cancer.
Or cancer, yeah. Well, just to wrap up, so how would viewers be able to help support the organization? I mean, there's the Rock the Ride type of opportunity, but what else can they do?
Well, go to our website, team26.org. You can learn more about what we do. Follow us on Facebook, and
I mean, can you join the team? I mean, or how does that work?
well, I mean, we're pretty selective about who our 26 riders are for a couple reasons. One, we're doing a lot of miles day to day to day.
Yeah.
So we're looking at people who have good bike handling skills.
With time.
With
too.
time.
Yeah.
Each rider has to raise a little bit of money to support the operation. Frankly, I'd like to get a lot more high school and college kids involved.
Oh, good.
They're the real
That's right.
change agent in
right.
this.
Yeah, no, well, I think if you keep up the social media activities and broaden the message through the event rides, you'll just reach
But
more people.
what I like to encourage people to do, again, we ride 4 or 6 days a year.
Right.
There are a lot of organizations that in every state that work 365 days a year.
Right.
So when I show up at an event where we've been prior years, and a mom comes up to me and says, I came to your event in 2016. I signed up to as a volunteer for the moms.
Right.
And this is what I'm doing now, and what they're doing is extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes me happy.
Right.
Right? Because
That's
if we
right.
can empower people to really engage in this issue in a meaningful way, and that spreads exponentially, then we're raising
something,
awareness, and we're building a force. And I don't want to say, force may be the wrong word, because it's helping drive that cultural change.
The multiplier effect.
Right, where people are having conversations with their neighbors
Yep.
and engaging in that sort of conversation that will lead to some change.
That's great, Monte. Well, thank you so much for coming down and explaining all of this, and good luck. And
I'd like to have you back as a rider.
I know. Well, just ask, and we'll fit it in.
We'll get you out there next year.
Right on. Thank you, Monte.
Thanks, Fred.
All right, everybody. That was Monte Frank, the founder of Team 26 and the Sandy Hook Ride on Washington. If you would like to know more about the organization, you can check out their website at team26.org. That's all we got time for right now. Thanks so much. We'll see you again soon. All Things Bike is brought to you by FitWorks, Rider First Bike Fitting, Rider Matched Bike Sales. Locations in Peabody, Massachusetts, Waitsville, Vermont, and Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. And Frame and Wheel, eBay selling services for cyclists, bike shops, bike companies, and cycling-related nonprofit organizations. Time, space, cash, pick 3. And AD Bikes, the modern face of Austro-Daimler cycling and the bike company of the future. Become Bike. Become AD Bike.